Dr. Wright, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. I would love to jump right in. I've heard you say that there's a 30-second habit that can burn more body fat than a long run. What is it and why does it work so effectively?
Oh, it's more than a habit. It's a scientifically backed method. And it's sprinting. Actually, only less than 1% of adults would dare sprint. But it's something we've done our entire lives and just getting back into it. So sprinting.
And so what goes on from a physiological level that allows the body to burn body fat within a short amount of time?
Well, uh, sprinting is actually best for your cardiovascular system. And in doing so, that kind of energy that it takes to work that hard helps to recompose your body. So, and if you're strictly talking about physiology and you're burning body fat actually down in zone 2 or the base training zone before we reach our lactate threshold. But sprinting is hard enough work that it revitalizes our stem cells. It stimulates our body to understand we're not sitting in a cave dying somewhere. So this 30-second habit coupled with heavy lifting is what truly I have found in myself and others that recomposes bodies, which is, and notice I didn't say lose weight, recomposes bodies, which is really critical for anyone who wants to be lean.
Right. You mentioned recomposes the body, which I think is an important concept to talk about. Like, why should people focus on body composition versus just losing weight?
Yeah, so I think the bathroom scale is an easy thing. Most of us don't have a complex um, scale that can tell us how much fat, how much muscle we are. But the reality is, it does matter what we're made of. So we can be very thin, but still be mostly body fat, or we can be lean and be mostly muscle with a healthy amount of body fat. So it's the composition of what we're made of that's important, because weight can be deceptive. A 300-pound lineman or 250-pound rugby player has a lot of lean muscle mass versus you can be 250 pounds and be 51% fat. So the absolute number on the scale is less relevant to me in terms of health and vitality. So there's a concept. Think about this. I think this is the most marked example. When you think about a track and field athlete, the throwing athletes, the discus, the javelin, the shot put, those people, if you just looked at their body morphology, you might think, oh, those people aren't in shape versus the sprinters. Look at those sprinters. They're so lean. But the reality is, if you look at the body composition of the field athletes, they are so packed with muscle, no one would call them overweight, right? So that's how weight itself can be deceptive versus what are you truly made of.
So I think that what can be confusing as well is that when people are getting older, you lose muscle. And if you don't lift weights, you're going to naturally lose muscle over time. And then people feel like, well, this is just it. I'm just getting older. But really, they could be lifting weights and building muscle to help them stay young. Like, talk about that.
Yeah, so there's one of the hallmarks, or in my book, Unbreakable, I call these things time bombs of aging, is the natural progression of time. And in time, we will lose lean muscle mass. It is one of the physiologic processes, with the biggest hits of aging coming in the early 40s and right after you turn 60. But the reality is, that doesn't have to be the end of the story. There is not an age or skill level when we can't, by investing in ourselves, build muscle. So, I have lots of examples in my own clinic, in my own life, where when you feed yourself enough protein, enough calories, and lift things that are heavy, you can build muscle. During my perimenopause time, which is quite a while ago now, I built 8 pounds of muscle and exchanged that for the body fat that I had built. So while losing muscle happens with age, you can reverse that time bomb with the shield of muscle building.
There's a lot of people that when they're trying to transform their health, they think they can just eat clean, do some cardio, maybe lift a little bit of weights here and there, right? But focusing on cardio, like why are most people still gaining belly fat even when they quote unquote eat clean and do some cardio?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons why our bodies change with age. One has to do with our hormone composition, which I'm happy to talk about. But the other one, I want to challenge the notion of eating clean, doing some cardio, lifting a few weights, because unless you track it, I mean, I have lots of friends who say that, oh, that tomorrow I'm going to start eating clean. I'm going to do it. Okay. I challenge you to really track what you're eating, because until you pull out one of these handy dandy free macro counters, you may not realize the amount of a simple carbs you're eating. Because most people who aren't educated in this don't know. They don't know. For instance, here's an example. I'm going to eat clean, but it's Girl Scout cookie week. And so I'm going to have 3 Thin Mints. Well, what you don't know until you start tracking is that 3 Thin Mints has 180 calories of fat, right? Or so you're mostly clean, but you just poison the whole system. Or until you start tracking and eating clean, I mean, people would argue that chicken is, especially if it's organic, is clean, right? But there's a difference between a chicken breast and a chicken thigh. And so for eating clean and wanting to be healthy, the calorie difference, the fat content difference matters. So when those blanket statements are made, I say, well, let's track it. Let's track 3 weekdays and 2 weekend days and see what's really happening. What are you really consuming? How many simple carbs are you taking? Are you getting enough fiber? Are you eating enough protein? And I think it's amazing when people actually take the time to do that. The same thing goes with a little cardio and a little weightlifting. Unless our body perceives strategic stress, we may not build muscle. Because I mean, I have, and then it begs the question, what are we lifting for, right? If we're lifting for endurance, okay, do your thing. Lift 30 reps, the lightest weight you can till failure. It may take you 30 reps to get 5 pounds to failure, right? If you're lifting for hypertrophy, meaning you like big muscles, and it's a legitimate way to lift, then you're going to do more mid-range reps. But in aging, in longevity, listen, I'm teaching people to lift for strength and power. It's different. Strength is not only muscle strength, but it's neuromuscular pathways, and power is lifting over time. So when you say something simple that people say to you all the time, probably say to me, I go back and I ask more questions. What are you really eating? How are you really lifting? And a little bit of cardio where I'm living right now means pounding it out in a mid heart rate, high intense. I keep doing air quotes if you can't see me, but because people sometimes don't know what they're doing, right? In terms of they think they're doing the right thing, but is what they're doing really meaningful to them? So I just ask them to step back and be more curious about their behaviors.
And we're going to get more like tactical and talk about like protocols and stuff for losing like visceral fat, gaining muscle, and aging. But first, aging is a hot topic right now, and I don't see it going away. Just where things are. Do you think it's possible for somebody to reverse aging or at least slow it down with lifestyle alone, or do you think that that's not enough?
So here's my framework. I have been talking about uh, the mantra of my career, and I've been in medicine business since the 90s. First as a cancer nurse and then as an orthopedic surgeon for so many years. The mantra of my whole career has been, I'm going to change the way we age in this country. So I've been talking about it for at least 25 years. And all of my academic research at the University of Pittsburgh was in the field of musculoskeletal aging and longevity. So it might be new to pop culture. It is not new to those of us who've been around a long time. But what is the fact about aging? Well, from the minute of our conception, to the moment of our death, every single moment, millifraction, millisecond to minute to hour, we're aging. It's what we do. And it's so natural. I think what you're getting at is how we age. Right now, people are interested in how we age. And so 5 years ago, not that many people were talking about longevity. And then 3 years ago, everybody's talking about longevity. And now a very rational pivot is not so much about living to 150. It's about living well all the years you live. And frankly, in doing so, you are likely to live longer. But the primary return on investment is not 150 years. It's, for me, getting to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, to the very last minute of my life, whether it's 97 or 107, I don't know, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would love to hear your thoughts being that you've been in this for so long and that you've had your own journey with longevity. Like if you woke up today and you were like, "Hey, I wanna, like, extend my life by, like, 2 decades or the quality of my life by 2 decades," like, what types of things would you focus on?
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd get more serious about it earlier. So I've had a couple phases in my life, right? So I was an athlete my whole life, and that's what a lot of people do. You're really gunning it until you get really busy. And I would have continued that my whole life. So I think 35 to 45 is a critical decade, right? You're coming out of school, you're starting your career. Most of us get really busy. And that's when great habits drop off. But I think that's when great standards should be established. Like, this is not a new thing to me. It's not a 6-week program. It is the way I live, right? So I think there's that critical decade time. Um, for me, what happened is I was doing all of that at 40. I was in the best shape of my life. And then I got into a really busy time in my career, and I had a child after 40, and I was a head football doctor for University of Pittsburgh and traveling all over the place. And time took over until in my late 40s, I became perimenopausal, and it just slammed me. Like, I didn't even recognize this athlete I had been. So number one, I would start earlier. I would make this a lifestyle that never ends. Number two, I would not just follow fads and a 6-week program. This is how I live. I don't order differently when I'm out with my friends than I do when I'm not alone. This is just how I live. Number three, I think it's really critical to focus on the simple things. Listen, we get all gadgeted out in the biohacking world, right? I'm just going to tell you, I mean, I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble, but no amount of sauna, red light therapy, cold plunges, hands full of supplements that may or may not have any human data, although I am not opposed to any of those modalities at all. What I am opposed to is that we go to them first in a min-max world where we want the maximum out of the minimum, and we forget the pillars of health. We forget sleep is critical to all things. We forget to or we don't establish a habit of going to bed at the same time every night, getting up at the same time every morning, seeing some sunlight, and setting our circadian rhythm. We ignore that. And I am the most guilty. Listen, I was a surgical resident and a young attending for so many years. I used to say stupid things like, oh, I don't need to sleep now. I'll sleep when I die. Now, only to be terrified by knowing that I'm going to die if I don't sleep, and I can't get back all those years of not sleeping. So sleep, aerobic exercise, great. Everybody in this country, the number one killer of men and women is cardiovascular disease. You can't ignore your heart, but that is not the end all and be all. We must lift. We must challenge our muscles because muscles and the bones they pull on are metabolic organs, right? So let's set up some standards for building muscle. That's 4. Number 5, in our busynesses of life, probably one of the most important parts of living as long as possible in the best health is having a social community that is truly supportive. And it doesn't take 30 people like it did in high school. It takes 5, maybe 5, right? I encourage people who follow me or reading my book to choose 5 to travel on this journey with. But they must be like-minded, right? They can't be naysayers. They can't criticize you for your healthy lifestyle. They have to be in it with you.
I'm curious, like, what did your own journey teach you about self-worth and resilience?
Well, I've never had a problem with self-esteem. People might say I had a problem with ego. I'm a surgeon after all. That comes with the territory. But um, I think it's real. You know what? I've been trying to motivate people in my orthopedic job. I used to teach a lot of classes for the community called START, which is literally from couch to 5K. And I have tried everything to motivate people. I've tried the yell at you, you're going to die method. I've tried the here's all the information method. But here's what I've decided after more than 30 years of caring for people is that until you decide that you are worth the daily investment in your health, nothing is going to matter. Nothing's going to motivate you if you prioritize everything above your own health. And that stands in my own life. I talk about these things all the time, but no one should assume that for me it's any easier than for anybody else. I mean, it is not willpower that's going to take us to the gym. It's discipline and believing you're worth it. I said before, I was listening to a podcast I did a couple months ago where I stated, and it's the truth, until I am done with a workout and I'm feeling like because I just did something really hard or set a PR or something, I'm not somebody who skips to the gym overjoyed to go do this, but until the very minute that I'm done, right? So everybody's motivated by different things. And I'm actually motivated not only by the long term, how I'm going to feel at 97, but I'm motivated by how it makes me feel today when I'm done.
Like, pivoting back to fat loss, what do you think is a big lie that people are believing right now that is actually like making things harder for them?
That starvation works. That starvation is the pathway to health and fitness. Because being chronically low energy, in athletes, we call it relative energy deficiency. In dieting, it can be the same thing where we're having micro amounts of calories. The reality is that it takes a certain amount of energy to effectively lose weight, because if you just starve yourself, you will feel low energy. You won't feel motivated to go out and do the other things. Your brain will work more slowly, if not metabolically slowly, because it'll suck glucose out of everywhere else, but you'll feel low energy. But what happens when you just focus on losing pounds? You will lose a certain percentage of muscle as you're losing fat. It's total body loss. It's not just fat. That's the myth. People think, oh, I'm going to lose fat. You're going to lose everything, people. You're going to lose muscle. You're going to lose fat. So a way to help maintain more muscle as you lose weight is to have a diet that consists of enough protein that you continue to feed your muscles while you're in calorie deficit. And it doesn't have to be thousands of calorie deficit a day, a small calorie deficit, 300 or 500, whether that's a mix of food deficit or energy expenditure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that you just starve yourself and undereat is a really bad thing to follow, because it just slows your metabolism down. You're not going to have the energy to perform workouts at the gym. I mean, as a trainer myself, it's like, one of my pet peeves is when people will go on these extended fasts and they'll come to the gym not realizing that when you're on an extended fast, unless you've been doing it for some time, I mean, your energy is going to tank, and because your body's not used to it. And so I think it's a multifaceted thing where it works negatively if you're not careful, at least in my opinion. And I think with that said, I think that people, the reason that people will go on fasts and do some of the biohacking stuff is like, I got to recalibrate my hormones. I got to like do things to stimulate autophagy and that sort of thing. What is your stance on all of that, and what role do the hormones play?
Here's my framework. I mean, my day job is as an elite sports doctor to high performing athletes, right? You got to ask yourself why you're doing this. So you just use the example of you training people and they show up 7 days fasted and they expect to do a hard workout. Okay, here's the Venn diagram that I work from because it matters what you're trying to do. Imagine a circle where my hand is. If you are going for peak performance, if you are a high level athlete, you are not going to starve yourself. You are going to do different kinds of reps. You are going to train in a different high performance way. You're going to taper towards your competition. Those behaviors do not necessarily infer longevity. Longevity behaviors like calorie restriction for long periods of time, pushing your body to autophagy. Longevity behaviors don't necessarily infer high performance because high performing athletes don't generally live to 107 years old, do they? Right? They burn it all out. I mean, I have plenty of examples, including, I mean, my husband's still alive, but he was a professional athlete for 13 years, and we used at least one of his bodies. I always tease him, we used up your body once for sport. So there's those two. And then there's the third circle in the Venn diagram. Well, what about wellness? What about the balance? What about the Zen? Well, those behaviors that beget wellness are not necessarily the austerity that gets you longevity, at least in rats, or the high performance that we get in peak performing athletes. So when you say something like that, and when your clients show up 7 days fasted and still want to perform, my first question is, what is your goal? And when people come into I have a business called Precision Longevity where I take high performers and we address this. The first question we spend in is, what do you value? And out of your values, what are your goals, right? Because if your goal is peak performance, squeezing performance out because you're going to go do some heroic thing, that's very different than if we really are trying to live more than 97 years. Does that make sense?
100%. I think one of the other common pitfalls with people is when they're getting older is that when they're trying to lose belly fat, it doesn't come off as fast. And they often blame their hormones. Like, how does somebody know it's their hormones, like, versus just a crappy lifestyle?
Well, number one, let's be truthful with ourselves. People aren't stupid. People know if they're eating. I mean, people know. I mean, people who are having a hard time losing weight and have tried every diet in the book, they know that they have a weight problem. They'll be the first to tell you. I have had patients tell me, yeah, I'm fat. I get it. People are not stupid. So, but people are dishonest with themselves, right? We're self-protective. It goes back to I'm eating clean, I'm doing cardio, I'm lifting. Being honest enough and authentic enough to step back and say, are you really? And are you really doing everything? Okay, I believe you. If you say you are, I believe you. It is never a bad time to go get some blood work done. I mean, I think during the critical decade, 35 to 45, if you have not established a relationship with a clinician who can order labs for you, who can make sure your cardiovascular health, who can address for you, is this amount of body fat you have productive or non-productive? I think that's perfect because I have a lot of people who come to me when we're working them up for surgery and we talk about their medical history and they're like, yeah, I have no medical problems. My next question is, do you have no medical problems because you haven't been to the doctor in 30 years or because you really have no medical problem? So I don't think there's any time to get assistance. But number one, be authentic and truthful with yourself. Number two, if you truly are doing everything you know how to do, make sure there's nothing medically wrong and get a clinician. And then number three, continue to be curious and figure out how midlife bodies need to exercise differently because there are significant hormone changes. Men start to lose their testosterone in their 30s and have a slow, steady aging decline like this. It's a slow, steady decline. that's going to change things. In my orthopedic practice, I get midlife men coming in, they're just exhausted. They've lost the spark of life. They may or may not care about sex anymore, which seems hard to believe, but sometimes. And they have multiple tendon and ligament injuries in multiple joints. When I see a guy like that, I'm testing his testosterone because that is a sign of low testosterone. Now, here's a caveat. I'd like every young man before he turns 40 to get his baseline testosterone drawn. Because if I get a 55-year-old who has those things and I draw their testosterone, it may fall into the normal range. It may fall between 250, which is the lowest of normal, which is very low for a man, and over 1,000. Let's say he comes back at 500. Okay, fine. It falls in the normal range. But for him, he may have always lived in 1,000. So he's going to notice the difference physiologically. So that's a man. For a woman, our hormones are much more complex. When we're in our fertility years, we have a monthly cycle of high-low and high-low hormones. And then in perimenopause, on average, that starts at 45. There are so few eggs left in the ovaries because you know that we're born with all the eggs we're ever going to have. There's so few eggs left that the body is screaming to produce more estrogen. It's trying to adjust to this. So it's called, in menopause circles, it's called the zone of chaos. That's why measuring hormones in perimenopause is so useless until our eggs no longer produce any estrogen. And we're in menopause. And so in menopause, for women, aging is not a slow, precipitous decline. I mean, it is not a slow, insidious decline. In women, it's a precipitous drop-off when estrogen exits the door, where we see much more loss of bone, much more loss of muscle. The brain is starving without estrogen to help it. And we get a rapid increase in cardiovascular disease. So it's a very different aging process for men than women.
So truth telling, like what you said at the beginning, I think is spot on. And the hard thing is that obviously when you age, it becomes harder to lose belly fat because of hormonal changes, et cetera, like you just mentioned. I also know that people will then use that as an excuse and say, you know what, like I'm just getting older. It's just aging. That's just what's going on. And I think that when people do that, it takes away from their own level of happiness because they're not able to be honest with themselves with what they actually want. And instead, they're just saying, you know what, like I'm going to tell myself or prove to myself that I'm right and this is true and that aging is the cause of why I'm not losing weight instead of instead of being honest and trying to figure out like what they can actually do. When it comes to people specifically like in their late 40s, early 50s, like how does it change? Like how can somebody begin to lose the visceral fat, the body fat at that age? Like is there anything different they should do other than what we've already talked about?
Well, we have talked about it, but I'll summarize it. Number one, for women, you need to make your hormone replacement decision. You need to do that based on facts, not fiction. So there's a lot of mythology in popular culture due to the Women's Health Initiative that was published in 2002 that has now been reevaluated and found the data has been disproven. So you must make your hormone replacement decision because estrogen is one of the elixirs of longevity for women, number one. So you have to make that decision. Number two, you must sleep, right? We make growth hormone at night. We recalibrate our brain at night. We completely rejuvenate and our gut rests at night, unless you've had a pizza at midnight before you go to bed. So we must sleep, and there's lots of ways to help calibrate sleep. Number three, if you do one exercise besides walking every day, you must lift weights. Then you must if we're lifting strength and power, and I lay this all out in Unbreakable, we must put down the mamby-pamby pink weights, which we need to lift 30 times to get to failure. And we must gradually progress to lifting heavy. And there is great data to support this. Even the women who have osteoporosis, Lift More study says they can safely build muscle while lifting heavy. And what does that mean? Well, we're still trying to lift to failure, but with fewer reps, heavier weights. So the range is 3 to 6 reps. But I've been taking care of people for 30 years, and I'm going to tell you for sure, and this is my experience in my previous books, people prefer to be told exactly what to do. So when I worked this out with my own strength conditioning coach, I do 4 reps, and this is what I prescribe: 4 reps, 4 sets. So what does that mean? It means that if I'm under a bench press, I can push 4 reps out. I could probably push 5, but I am not able to push 6 without dropping one side of the bar and, being dangerous. So getting to failure in lower reps, this does many things. But the first thing, if you're just starting out, you're just progressing from low weight, body weight, low weights, hypertrophy up to heavy lifting. It's called a beginner's gains, meaning for the first while, you're going to be able to more rapidly because you're retraining your neuromuscular pathways. The physiology of the brain and muscle is that one motor neuron innervates on a motor unit, and we're recruiting motor units to fire all together in coordination. That's a neuromuscular issue. After you get coordinated again, that's when your muscle will actually become damaged and build in strength. Once you've done that, and I prescribe 4 reps, 4 sets for the 4 power lifts, right? Bench, some kind of pull, deadlift, squat. And then those are, just as a caveat, those 4 power lifts are supported by supporting single muscle lifts for the bench, for instance, biceps, triceps, lats, delts, rows. Um, those reps are higher. Those are about 8 reps to failure, right? But they support the compound lifts. When you've got that, when you've been doing that for a while, you can progress to power, which is strength over time, right? So that's when we talk about, well, how about a little tempo lifting down in 3 seconds and exploding up, right? And so that's an advanced move. Nobody needs to get there tomorrow, but that's how we progress over a lifetime. Because remember, this is not a 6-week program. This is a lifestyle until you die.
Yeah. And when it comes to like nutrition, I know that people kind of miss that, specifically in the context of protein. I mean, protein has been talked about for a while now as far as the importance of it. We know it's important, but yet I see a lot of people, especially women, like under eating protein. And the excuse has been over the years, like, I don't want to get too bulky. I don't like certain foods. At least that's been my experience with a lot of my female clients over the years. Um, Talk about like nutrition, like where should the priorities be when it comes to, you know, building the best body possible, having a healthy body composition?
We will get you back to this episode of the Adversity Advantage in just 1 second, but first, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Timeline Nutrition. Some of my main priorities right now are optimizing my health, wellness, and longevity. And as many of you know, I've been a fan of Timeline Nutrition and MitoPure for a really long time, especially these new longevity gummies. And right now, Timeline has a special offer that you can get 20% off your first Timeline purchase. And there's never been a better time to experience the benefits of MitoPure. And if you use my code Doug at checkout, you will receive 20% off today. If you've been thinking about trying Timeline, this is your sign. Once again, they're offering my audience a 20% discount on all first-time purchases. So use code Doug at checkout to get 20% off, or go to timeline.com/Doug to get 20% off. Again, timeline.com/Doug to get 20% off your first purchase of MitoPure and Timeline Nutrition. Now back to the show.
So you know what's ironic about what you just said, or about what people say to you and say to me too, is they don't want to get bulky from eating protein and lifting heavy. You don't get bulky from that. You get lean from that. What you get bulky from is eating food and sitting on the couch. That is what makes you bulky. Not so that's the irony, right? So nutritionally, again, truth telling, what are we really eating? And when I question women, this is what I hear. I don't really eat anything for breakfast, just some coffee. I'll have a salad at lunch. And then my question is, are you putting any protein on that? Oh, yeah, I'm putting some protein. But then this is what happens. And then tablespoons of salad dressing, green goddess, and Thousand Island, whatever for taste, is being dumped on the top. And this is what I see in the cafeteria. The plastic boxes are then shaken up, and what you get is salad soup. And what people don't realize, and this is part of the truth telling, is that every tablespoon of oil, whether it's good oil like avocado or EVOO versus bad oil, is 100 calories of fat, right? So you quickly turn a salad into a high calorie cheeseburger type meal, right? So number one, truth telling. But number two, when I explain to women that it doesn't take that much food or calories to get enough protein, which I adhere to the 1 gram per ideal pound protein level. There is data, because I get a lot of backlash about this a lot out in social media, but there are data to support up to 0.73 to 0.86 grams per pound in high protein intake. But listen, again, I've been a clinician for 30 years. Nobody's doing that math. Nobody. So if I say to you, you weigh 160 pounds, eat 0.86 grams per pound, nobody's doing that math. So 1 gram per pound, knowing that they're probably not going to get it in, knowing that we don't absorb that anyway due to our midlife microbiome, right? And then the other misnomer is that it's a lot of food. So then I explain to people, I can get 30 grams of protein in a cup of Greek yogurt, which is about 25 grams of protein, right? I can get 40 grams of protein in a chicken breast the size of my hand, right? So it's not that much volume of food as I explain nutrition to people, but it takes enough calories, it takes enough protein. The other side of protein, it has to be high quality protein. Let's talk about that for a minute. What does that mean? Well, the first question I get is, what if I'm vegan? What if I only eat plants? Can I get enough protein? Well, my answer to that is absolutely. I mean, look at bovine, look at bulls, right? Cows and bulls are entirely protein, and they only eat plants, but they eat plants all day long. So if you want to be a vegan or a vegetarian or whatever you decide to eat that's mostly plant-based, you're just going to have to eat a lot more food to get the protein in that you're going to need, number one. Number two, you have to be concerned about the essential amino acids. There are 20 amino acids. We don't make 9 of them. And of the ones we don't make, we have to make sure that we're getting enough leucine, which is the branch chain amino acid that is most effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. And so do you know where nature puts the best high quality protein? Mother's milk. The whey in mother's milk is the highest protein, highest quality. But listen, none of us are drinking breast milk. So whey protein has as the highest amount of leucine in it. And you can always supplement with a high quality whey protein.
I want to talk about something that I think I think people get totally wrong, and that is that when they're not losing belly fat, they should just cut out carbs. And we've talked about how like certain changes in your lifestyle can impact performance, and I think when you cut out carbs, that can certainly be one of those things. What's your stance on like low carb as it equals to losing body fat?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up, and I think you have to be curious enough to know that a carb is not a carb is not a carb, right? Pure grain sugar out of a sugar packet is a carb, but it makes your body respond very differently than steel cut oats or a carb that comes from a vegetable, a fiber carb, right? So I am not anti-carb at all. I am anti-simple carb unless you're training for a race. When I was running marathons, I would need simple carbs and fast as a quick energy. But a day-to-day person needs slow digesting carbs, fiber-filled carbs, because without it, you will be so low energy. Listen, I did this myself. So uh, I did this experiment, which continues today. A couple of years ago, for the first time, I've got one on now. I put on a continuous glucose monitor, not because I'm diabetic, I'm not, but I was doing an experiment to see how my body responded to carbs. And so I am very, very sensitive to simple carbs. Um, with big spikes, the spikes go down, which is normal. But um, what that does, that crash makes you exhausted and it um, makes you search for more simple carbs. So I did the thing. I tried to only eat very low carbs, like less than, I can't even remember, less than 80 grams, which is very low carbs. And you know what? I was exhausted all the time. So I am not anti-carb. I think most carbs, unless you're training or in races, should be high fiber, slow digesting.
And do you think that that's why people, I mean, so what you just said brought up an important thing that I think needs to be talked about. And sometimes you'll hear people say, well, that's why cutting calories doesn't work because my energy will go down and because I'll end up starving myself. But yet, like, you have to be in a caloric deficit.
You have to be in a caloric deficit.
It's like this weird thing. And I think sometimes people equate caloric deficit to meaning, okay, let me maximize that. But there has to be a healthy balance. You can't just plummet your metabolism and your hormones by not eating anything. How can people like strike that balance? Is the only way to like hire a coach and come up with a plan where you're tracking everything? Or do you think there's a way that people could actually do it themselves where they're figuring out a way to manage their calories in a way that's not going to tank their energy?
So you can be in caloric deficit two ways, right? You can do the same activity and cut the intake, or you can keep the intake and up the expenditure, right? And here's what I mean. So let's say you want to lose a pound a week. Well, you need to be in a 500 calorie caloric deficit a day to do that, right? You can do that by cutting out 500 calories of food, or you can do that by doing 500 calories more exercise, which equates to about 5 miles of exercise. Or you could do it half and half. So you could do 250 less calories of food, 250 more calories of activity, and you'll still end up in that caloric deficit that you'll lose a pound a week. I think the balanced approach, that the third option I gave you, is probably the one that's most tolerable to people, because cutting out 500 calories, although not that hard, is meaningful if you're just starting out. So a simple way to cut calories, I had an executive do this once before he came to me. He just started eating half of everything served to him, because in the United States, which probably lots of people are listening are from, our portion sizes are astronomical. And if you've ever been to Europe, you know that in Europe, you get a plate of pasta and it's a little bowl of pasta. That's your dinner. In the United States, if you go to Olive Garden or you go to Cheesecake Factory, you're getting a freaking mountain that you can take home, and we think, oh, clean your plate. So what he did is, without any help from us initially, he just started eating half of the portions fed to him, and that made a difference for him. So you don't have to hire a trainer. However, here's the deal. I always make this advice. For your birthday, holidays, Christmas, instead of asking for another purse, more socks, more whatever, ask for a nutritionist or a trainer, right? Spend the few $100s that you would have bought on something useless on a service that can change your life.
I love that. Invest in your health, right? It's like there's the quote that, I see popping around, and it's not mine, obviously, but it's like the person who's healthy has a million wishes. The person who's unhealthy has one wish, right? And it really hits home every time I see it. You talked about strength training and power and reps. We've talked about sprinting and walking. Like how does this all tie together if you were to like lay it out like in a week? Like what's your framework if somebody were coming to you and wanting to put it all together?
Yeah. So Every night, you're going to go to bed at the same time. You're going to get up at the same time. Even on weekends, I am up at 5 a.m. every Saturday and Sunday. It's a circadian rhythm thing, right? Sleep is non-negotiable. So every day, right? Every night, number one. Number two, every day we're going to walk, whether it's a zone with base training day or not. We're going to either walk in our lives. We're going to put more steps in. From an intentional cardiovascular standpoint, I describe a method that I use myself and for my people called the 80-20. 80%, and this is based on the research of Inigo San Martino. He's a Tour de France researcher whose lab is in my building. 80% of the time, you are going to work out at base training, low heart rate base training, broken up into 45-minute to 60-minute sessions. So that's 3 or 4 times a week. I suggest people do it after their biggest meal so that we're double timing, sucking the glucose out of our meal blood into our muscles with activity. So that's walking or base training, right? 20% of the time, meaning twice a week after your walk, you're going to sprint. Now, sprinting is not on a track per se. Mine's on a treadmill. It can be on any way to get your heart rate up to as high as you could, as is healthy for you. So this is what it looks like. So when I do, I'll give you my example. When I have this fancy dancy treadmill that goes up to an incline of 40 or like absurd degrees, I'm done with my zone 2 on that, my base training. I put the elevation down to 2 and I punch it up to 11. And I'm not very tall, so I am running as fast as these little legs will carry me without flying off the back. My heart rate gets up in the 180s, and I keep it there for 30 seconds. You can do anything for 30 seconds, and then you totally recover, and then you do that 4 times. And not only do you feel like a when you're done, but you're exhausted, right? So that's cardio. And then, so that's 80-20. Every day we walk, twice a week we sprint. On days we don't do that, we don't sprint, then we lift a minimum of twice a week, ideally 4 times a week, but it doesn't have to take 3 hours. It doesn't, I can get it done in 45 minutes if time is a thing, right? And it's exactly how I explained it to you. It is the 4 power lifts and the supporting lifts. It doesn't take that long. And then nutritionally, you support that with enough protein to build muscle.
One of the many roadblocks to all of this, and I talk about it a lot on the show, is stress. Talk about the relationship between stress, aging, body fat, etc.
Yeah. So you know what? Stress is normal. Our body has a nervous system that responds to good stress and bad stress. And so our stress response, the elevation in cortisol, the flight or fight, is normal. I want to stop demonizing stress. The bad stress or mishandled stress is what causes a constant elevation in our inflammatory markers, our interleukins, our C-reactive protein, our insulin sensitivity. That leaves us in a state of high inflammation. It's the inflammation that doesn't go away because, listen, inflammation is normal too. It's how I heal people when I fix them orthopedically. Inflammation is normal. Chronic inflammation is what causes diseases and what we call inflammaging. So stress in itself is a normal physiologic response. It is the continued elevated levels of stress that come from what we eat, from our lifestyles, from our culture, which is work more and more and more without restorative times. And I'm guilty of that. I work a lot. And that can age us faster through the mechanism of chronic inflammation.
And I also think that trauma can sometimes play a role in our physiology and stress in our body. Like, what are your thoughts around like emotional pain and trauma as it relates to what we've been talking about?
Yeah, you know what? That's so interesting that you bring it up. I mean, I think there's the for people who go through high trauma in their childhoods and never work through that, that can certainly contribute to adult stress because not because of it could be because of the epigenetics of stress as a child, but because we never learned to deal with current stress in a healthy way because it's always through the filter of our childhood trauma. But something that's really interesting that I've been talking to more doctors about is especially doctors like me that or emergency room doctors or neurosurgeons or anybody that deals with trauma through an emergency room or in a hospital or something. The things we see or saw when we were training and see now. I mean, I don't know who your audience is, but I'm just going to say this. I mean, as a resident, I saw a guy cut in half by a train. I saw a guy that poked his own eyes. I mean, these traumas that we see in our jobs, or think about firemen or policemen, um, we see that, compartmentalize it, and then go on the next day, never having processed the trauma of seeing what we see on our jobs. And part of burnout, I've become really convinced in doctors, firemen, policemen, anybody that deals with traumatic occupational, part of the burnout has to be that we never deal with how we're feeling about the trauma we see on the job. I mean, can you imagine taking care of a guy that's been half run over by a train and then leaving the trauma bay and going eating dinner without ever processing that? You carry that with you. And now when I rehash those stories with other doctors, I sometimes find the feelings coming back. And I'm like, why is it coming back 30 years later? It's because most of us never deal with it. So I think you're onto something that we carry that with us.
Well, and I think it's just downstream too, right? Because if you don't deal with your trauma, it can impact your self-worth, your self-esteem, your self-confidence, stuff in your brain. Maybe you then become addicted to drugs or alcohol, which then inhibits your ability to do the things that we're talking about or takes years off of your life. I mean, there's just so much there, right? That I think sometimes it's just not as simple as prescribing things from a workout perspective. At least in my experience, I've learned that like, hey, sometimes some of the biggest things I've said to my clients, and again, I think it takes time for me to get to that point with them is be like, hey, have you thought about like talking to like a mental health professional? Because I think letting go or dealing with that could actually help improve your overall health and wellness because there's just something that seems to be missing. And I think that as health professionals, we got to get better at having support systems and networks of people that we can refer out to, so that it can be like a multi-pronged approach with what we're doing. I mean, not to say obviously what we're talking about today, like for most people, bread and butter, sweet spot, but for the people that, are still having the self-esteem issues, still like struggle with self-confidence and belief in themselves. And there might be some stuff there that's deep rooted that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. But here's a caveat to that is that people know this, but nothing makes me feel more like or boost my confidence or than at my age, whatever, I think age is an excuse, but at my age doing a Spartan race, like how much better is that for a woman who's almost 60 or the sprinting, get off a treadmill, having flown across it at 11, which is really fast. That helps build confidence. But all of this hard work that you put in, frankly, also is a treatment for your stress, right? You'll feel calmer when you're done. So I completely hear what you're saying. But I also think challenging yourself physically can be cathartic.
Oh, 100%. And I do think that it needs to be a part of your recovery process no matter what. I was just saying that, if you're doing those things and there's still some stuff going on, there should be some room for some mental health help as well. Well, Dr. Wright, I could talk to you all day, all week about this stuff. I really love your message and your no BS approach to all of this. Something I really appreciate. We've covered so much information as it comes to aging, losing body fat, building muscle, longevity. Like, what are the main takeaways you want my audience to get out of this conversation?
Number one, we started with this kind of, is that there's never an age or skill level when your body will not respond to the positive strategic stress you put on it, which means it is a very hopeful future. And it also means if you're really being truthful and authentic with yourself, you have to ask yourself, why aren't you investing in your health, right? Let's just all be honest with ourselves. Number one. Number two, we spent a long time today laying out the, here's how you do it. But the last thought is not only that this is a physical resilience we're building, but listen, I'll tell you for sure, being decades older than many of your listeners probably, growing old is not for sissies. It can be really hard. However, engaging in the way we've talked about, realizing that we continue to have agency to make choices, that we can view our choices as taking control of our lives, as being committed to the challenge of aging well, that builds mental resilience. And it takes both to be unbreakable.
Unbreakable, the name of your latest book. Dr. Wright, thank you so much for coming on the pod, for sharing all of your wisdom. Highly recommend checking out your work and getting a copy of your latest book. I think what you do is really important.
Thanks so much for having me.